Morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you. My name is Melanie Cullens. I'm the Director General for National Programs and Business Services at the National Research Council of Canada. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you today at the Canadian Science Policy Conference. I am speaking to you from Ottawa, so from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. And I'd like to just start with a quick housekeeping, which is to say there is the opportunity to provide comments, questions, answers throughout the session. So please don't hesitate to do that. We will actually address the questions after we've heard from all of our panelists today. Right, and so with that, with respect to our session, I think it's a very timely session. Today, we're still all grappling with the pandemic and its unequal effects. Governments and players in innovation ecosystems, by which I mean policymakers, university researchers, government researchers, as well as the private sector, both small, medium-sized corporations and larger firms, are pivoting to address the challenge of sustainability, as we've seen evidenced by COP26. Around the world, we all understand national data-based understanding that coordinated science-based changes are required in our societies to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Our panel today is drawn from countries where top-down government innovation and economic development philosophies are long-standing: Norway, Japan, Germany, and others like Canada and the UK, where government innovation and economic development activities have traditionally been more market-driven. But as the pandemic has demonstrated, large challenges like the climate crisis cannot be solved by the market alone or one country alone. So the risks and the costs are too high for the private sector to bear solely, and governments need to create the right policy environment to benefit society as a whole. As well, these policies are very expensive to implement, and they are long-term, long-haul. And we've all seen, again with the pandemic, that successful delivery is going to require public acceptance and support. So having said that, I am very pleased to be here today to moderate a panel with an exciting international group of panelists from these different countries and from leading research, innovation, and technology organizations known for delivering solutions. Each participant today will have the opportunity to highlight their initiatives to address climate change and talk about how their international partnerships fit into those plans. So the aim is to discuss and highlight the successes, the best practices, but also to address the pitfalls and talk about how to avoid them. Sustainability is key to our survival. The problem of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change are recognized. But how can we marshal our innovation ecosystems to address these challenges and provide solutions? So today we have joining us Katrin Meland, who is the head of the Department of Research and Innovation of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries of Norway, Mike Biddle, the Program Director of Innovate UK's Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, Yuko Suda, the Deputy Director of the Japan Science and Technology Agency's Washington, D.C. office, and Daniel Holder of International Strategy at the RWTH Aachen University in Germany. And last but certainly not least, my colleague from Montreal, Eddie Zuppel, Program Leader for the National Research Council's Clean and Efficient Transportation Program. So without further ado, turning now to our first panelist, Katrin Meland from Norway. We look forward, Katrin, to benefiting from your extensive experience in research and innovation policy development. Katrin.
Thank you so much for thank you so much for the invitation to talk to you about the issues of immense importance to us all. Let me just start by introducing you to a few facts about Norway. Norway is not a very populated country. Only 5.4 million people lives here. It is not a small country, however, and has in fact a very long coastline, as you can see on the map. And the oceans have always been very important to the Norwegian economy and in fact our way of life. Our main industries are petroleum, natural gas, fishing, shipping, and shipbuilding. Since oil was discovered in the North Sea during the 1960s, the oil and gas sector gradually earned a dominant position in the national economy. The oil and gas industry is approximately 18% of the Norwegian GDP and 60% of export. And Norway is the second largest exporter of seafood and the world's fourth largest shipping nation measured by fleet value. Next slide, please. As of 14th of October, Norway has a new center-left government after 8 years of liberal conservative leadership. Looking at the big picture, we do not envisage a major shift in the economic policy. But the major priorities of the new government are getting more people into the workforce, creating activity throughout the country, increasing exports, and cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 55%. The government wants business incentives to explore and adopt new technology, especially regarding low and zero emission solutions, artificial intelligence, big data, and autonomous systems. And research, development, and innovation are crucial for Norwegian companies to assert themselves internationally. Norway has a specific strategy when it comes to bilateral cooperation in research, development, and innovation, and Canada is in fact one of Norway's most important partners in this regard. Our focus here today is on climate change and the environment. For quite obvious reasons, I would like to focus this talk about the oceans. And the ocean can, in fact, play a much greater role in reducing the world's carbon footprints than we have thought until now. According to a report from the expert group of the high-level panel of sustainable ocean economy, ocean-based climate solution could deliver a fifth of the annual emissions cut needed by 2050 to keep global temperature rise below 1.5. Global food demand will grow in accordance with population growth. And furthermore, there is an urgent need to reduce the carbon footprints in terrestrial food production system. There is a significant and largely untapped potential for low-impact production of high-quality seafood from the world's oceans. The gap in food supply could therefore be met by a steep increase in seafood production from fisheries and aquaculture. Next slide, please. The high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, the Ocean Panel, is a unique collaboration between 14 serving world leaders committed to building a sustainable ocean economy where effective protection, sustainable production, and prosperity go hand in hand. Together, the Ocean Panel countries represent nearly 40% of the world's coastline and 30% of the world's exclusive economic zones. We are very happy about Canada's ongoing contribution to the Ocean Panel, and the COP26 has resulted in President Biden joining the ranks, so there are now 15 countries that are part of this important initiative. We can only produce more food from the ocean if we manage and protect the ocean better. Evidence-based sustainable ocean management is a key to a prospering ocean-based economy within a healthy marine environment. In December 2020, the Ocean Panel committed to sustainable manage 100% of the ocean area under their national jurisdictions by 2025, guided by sustainable ocean plans. The aim is to show that it is fully possible to combine a prospering ocean-based economy with a healthy marine environment, as long as the solid environmental standards are in place. Keywords are knowledge, sustainable ocean management, and partnership. We are consequently following the development of the Canadian Blue Economy strategy with interest. Next slide, please. The Ocean Decade is a direct response to the Sustainable Development Goals as they apply to activities in the oceans. The rationale is simple and striking. Oceans are under threat, and we need a better understanding of the basic function of the oceans with regard to regulation of global climate. The mandate of the Ocean Decade is endorsed by the UNGA, with UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission responsible for its implementation. Both Norway and Canada are active in preparation in the so-called Decade Implementation Plan. Norway has a long and stable relationship with Canada, including a treaty from as far back as 1826, as well as a free trade arrangements from 2008. History shows that we both believe in dialogue and cooperation for a peaceful and well-functioning world. We have a bilateral MOU and a regular Norwegian Canada ministerial meeting regarding fishing, and there is a number of complementaries in marine and maritime industries. Next slide, please. Let me just emphasize a few points. Both our countries have common interest in the North Atlantic and the Arctic. We both have strong commitments to the ocean agenda, which is also confirmed by our new government. And priorities for the ocean decade will be reflected in the Norwegian presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers in 2022. This also paves the way for a Nordic-Canadian cooperation. The COP26 is taking place as we speak, and my message to you is quite simple. Canada and Norway together can contribute significantly to solving the challenges related to creating a more sustainable environment. How we deal with the oceans will be a key to our success. Thank you for your time and attention.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katrin. Our second panelist is Mike Biddle, as mentioned, from Innovate UK's Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is investing over £2 billion to deliver the research and innovation that businesses need to transform existing industries, create new ones, and deliver economic impact, jobs, and growth. So a big job. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, so if we could put the first slide up. Thank you. So the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is a multi-year program where we've been trying to look at where are the challenges that we all face, actually, but especially in the UK, and where is it that industry can help. So at Innovate UK, we're very passionate about innovation and research and development and how that can make a difference. And what we're trying to do is work in partnership with industry so that we can overcome the problems that we all face and also grow our economy as well. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So the £2.6 billion worth of public funding is going into the Challenge Fund across just over 20 challenges, which is being matched with about nearly £3 billion of private sector funding. So it's a very much a mission-driven approach under the industrial strategy that the UK has, which was launched back in 2017. And there were 4 grand challenges, and all of the challenges that we have in the Challenge Fund map to those grand challenges. But in many ways, whether we have them or any country who has them, they are the big problems we face in terms of how we will help our society to age better and for us to live better for longer, how artificial intelligence and data will change our economy, how we will move about more cleanly and more efficiently, and also the sort of clean growth agenda. What we have done is that each of the challenges has a challenge team around them led by a challenge director. And that's to put somebody from industry right at the heart of the decision making for how we can take the projects forward, make the selections, but also, most importantly, help them to deliver. And it's very much about transforming existing industries and creating entirely new ones. If you could go to the next slide, please. So all of the challenges map to the big issues that we face. So net zero plus, so the quest for net zero, but also a sort of cleaner environment agenda and how we do that. Health, aging and well-being, not only from a sort of classic healthy aging perspective, but also in terms of what is the next level of medical development enable for us as a society. And in fact, some of the things we were funding in there were actually sort of predicated on what happened if there was a pandemic, seeing as it was high up on the National Risk Register. If anything, it would have been better to have been doing that even sooner, but at least it positioned us to help to respond. And then also to think through some of the transformative technologies in terms of, quantum technologies as the new approach that might come and what that might enable, but also augmented and virtual reality and how we might interact with that. and also how might artificial intelligence change the way we do things in the services industry, which is a very important industry in the UK. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we've got all these big areas, and I'm just going to sort of focus in on one of them. As I say, we've got about 20 challenges. One of the challenges we've called industrial decarbonisation, which is about the quest for carbon capture, utilisation and storage, and also how might new alternative energy vectors such as hydrogen help potentially to solve these problems. In many ways, a lot of the technology is out there already, but it's how do you do it at scale, and how do you do it in a place that makes sense? And the government has got a set of strategies that it's been working through in terms of the industrial clusters mission, what was said in budgets at fiscal events in the UK, all the way through to the sort of green industrial revolution and in the industrial decarbonisation strategy. So these are things that we've all got to do as countries to think about how we will do this. But in actual fact, it's how does it work in place? And how will it work in that locality? And how do you connect these areas together? So what we've done is we've taken that top level mission and we've taken that target to then think about, well, what is it that we can do with industry to help build a program to make it happen, with a view of getting to the point of actually reducing the carbon emissions out by 2030. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So on the back of that, we launched the challenge a few years ago, and more recently we have announced the areas where we are investing in partnership with industry across the UK, and you can see that there with the dots on the map on the right. And this is very much about how do we achieve that transformative change? How do we get to net zero? What is that roadmap? How can we show how these technologies will work at scale? How does it all interconnect in terms of the different energy vectors? And also to think about the infrastructure that's required to make that happen. Because although this is a significant investment from the public purse in the UK, £210 million, it's being matched by private investment of £261 million. It will actually only really scale if we can show how industry will make this happen and how all of these technologies can work together. And in fact, we will learn things as we start to put them together, because if this was easy, we would have done it already. And that may actually then stimulate more research and development. And what we've been trying to do as well is make sure that it's not just a case of one area being successful, but how do we embed knowledge exchange and knowledge sharing into the program? Because what might work well in the northeast of the UK will probably help to what might be going on in the northwest or in Wales or other parts. And I think what we've been trying to do is not just think about what are the particular projects we fund, but how do we bring together a movement so that we can involve the relevant people to make that happen. And if we could just come on to my final slide now, please. So the main reason that we've been doing this, as I said, Innovate UK is passionate about innovation agenda and how research and development can help. But we're doing it because we are trying to improve the economy. And what we're actually seeing is from the funding that we've had already, we're seeing very promising signs in terms of the economic returns of the funding that we've been using. So of the first £200 million, roughly speaking, of projects that are completed, the projects that have been involving companies are seeing turnover increases of around 900 million in a range to 700 million to 1.1 billion pounds. We're seeing it is creating jobs, and we are seeing that, that we are actually attracting new participants to the funding. So Innovate UK is part of UK Research and Innovation, and nearly half of the participants that have come through this challenge fund approach are actually new to government grant funding and government programs, and new to us. And I think that's an important thing, which is as we all address these big challenges and these big missions, we actually need to bring everybody together and to involve people, because ultimately we all need to be successful together. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of some of the activity we've had in the UK, and I'll be very happy to pick up any questions as required later. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. So our next panelist represents one of the world's leading research and innovation agencies. She's based in Washington to facilitate scientific cooperation between the Japan Science and Technology Agency and partners across North and South America. So very interested to hear from Yuko.
So thank you, Melanie, for your kind introduction. I really appreciate this opportunity to share our agency's activities related to solving global issues with international perspectives. Next slide, please. So first, let me introduce an overview of where our agency is positioned in Japanese science technology innovation structure. The Japan Science and Technology Agency, shortly called as JST, is a mission-oriented funding agency under the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. We are involved in implementing Japan's national science and technology and innovation policies. But as you might know, there are many STI policies agenda here in Japan. So like STI Basic Plan and Integrated Innovation Strategy 2020, etc. So we do share the national priorities like artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, resilience, and other important technologies. And we seek an opportunity for collaboration domestically and internationally. So go to the next slide, please. So under the leadership of our president, Dr. Hamaguchi, JST drives all the programs with the Hamaguchi plan. So convergence, co-creation, and innovation for sustainable and resilient society. So those are core essence of this plan. So there are the philosophies envisioning the future, and they are rooted in every project JST is now promoting. Next slide, please. So for the rest of time, I give you some example of JST activities. So first, in terms of convergence, we launched recently Moonshot Research and Development Program. This is an iconic trial of JST converging knowledge, activities, and resources. We currently support 4 of the 7 programs under this Moonshot. So we are now developing cybernetic avatars, ultra early disease prediction and intervention, self-developing robots, and quantum computers. You can see the targeted goals beyond the limitations of conventional technologies. Next slide, please. So we are also promoting the convergence for overcoming the crisis we are now facing. So we have a strategy called Plan B. It is a non-medical, multidisciplinary approach to create a society where we can move and meet and work and gather and do business freely under pandemic conditions. Of course, clinical trials of vaccines and drugs, we call this Plan A. So this is quite important field to be addressed. But we view our role as research funding agencies critical to creating the way to a new normal, that we protect our society from the dangers of current and future crises. So throughout the funding for research and development and creating a collaboration platform, we explore a range of research areas to minimize the restriction on people's activities. So next slide, please. Next, please. So now I talk about the convergence for tackling local issues. So JC seriously considers domestic issues in all parts of the country. Thinking globally and acting locally is important to achieve sustainable development goals set by the UN. So we are paying attention to inclusion of disabled people, creating energy prosumers, proactive alert for disaster risk, elimination of sexual harassment, and stopping depopulation, etc. So we support local activities utilizing appropriate technologies and scientific knowledge with society respecting indigenous knowledge. Next slide, please. So we always prioritize inclusion and co-creation beyond multiple stakeholders from industry, academia, and beyond to make innovation. So we have funded the formation of innovation centers throughout Japan accelerating collaboration for the regional development. For visioning a future and working together, we co-funded an alliance with wider stakeholders and made the vision Japan 2050. So next slide, please. So this is the last slide I have. So inclusion beyond national borders, of course, matters. So we have to deepen and broaden perspective through partnership with diverse cultures. So we must set an agenda together with nations who knows their real needs. So one of the key requirements for sustainability and resilience is making partnership. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you, Yuko. So now we're going to turn back to Europe, in fact, and our fourth panelist is Dan Holder from RWTH Aachen, which is one of the world's leading engineering and technology universities. Dan works to develop and implement the university's internationalization strategy. And so over to you, Daniel, for the German perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Melanie. Since I'm the only one from a university on this panel, I guess that my take on the topic is slightly different. Like Melanie said, I come from Aachen, Aix-la Chapelle en français. It's located in Germany on the border of Belgium and the Netherlands. Next slide, please. An area, no, those are actually the old slides. But it doesn't matter. I wanted to show some pictures, but I just skipped those. It's an area where international collaboration is already inscribed into its geographical location. You know, my office is really 5K away from Belgium and the Netherlands. And RWTH Aachen University is the largest university of technology in Germany. Like Melanie said, or as she said, well known for its high standard of education and its close cooperation with industry. And as with the other partners, Canada is also one of our most important collaboration countries. We have strategic partnerships with the University of Alberta and the National Research Council, which are our most valued partners. Yeah, like I said, I wanted to show you a slide about the university. So just real quickly, it's the University of Technology with the engineering faculties at its core, but we also have faculties of architecture, business, humanities, and medicine. And I'm saying that because interdisciplinarity is really key to our self-understanding as a University of Technology. When it comes to combating climate change, Germany wants to achieve climate neutrality by 2045. I guess some of you have heard about that, read about it, and the political consensus is clear. We can only combat climate change internationally and on a global scale. And obviously, we need those local solutions that also the other panelists talked about. But we believe that we also need a sound supranational framework to coordinate these activities. And Germany being in the heart of Europe, it's obviously the European Union and here the European Union Green Deal. And R&D plays a crucial role in fighting climate change in Germany. So the expectation is similar. Technology should be a major driver in combating this problem. And the goal of our university is to contribute to this. And we only recently implemented several measures to connect already existing activities and also foster new interdisciplinary research networks in sustainabilities. And those are clustered around the 17 SDGs of the United Nations. So these really serve as a very important focal point for us. And international collaboration is very important, and we strongly believe that we need to learn about different views, methods, and approaches from our international partners, not only in research, but also in teaching and education and by exchanging students. And this also includes an intensified cooperation with countries in the global south, which do not produce as much CO2, but suffer even more from its devastating effects. And speaking as a representative of a university, I think one of the advantages, so to speak, is that we're not only a research institution, but one of our core missions also constitutes teaching and education. And I think particularly in regard to combating climate change, it allows us to work within a more experimental framework and with a broad and diverse set of stakeholders in order to develop solutions. And I think that this is very important because the fight is so complex that, you know, it must be participatory, it must be collaborative, and, you know, should involve people from inside and outside the academia. So not only students, but NGOs. And we're also very happy that, you know, Fridays for Future exist. And a very concrete example of this is, which becomes very relevant or has become very relevant at our university in the last few years, is the format of the Living Lab. You may have heard about it. It's a format where different stakeholders from academia and society come together in interdisciplinary settings in order to develop successful models tackling pressing societal issues. And those living labs are obviously, you know, impossible to think of without international collaboration. And we believe that we need to engage with and learn about best practices from all over the world. And that would have been my last slide. Sorry, that deck is the old one. And, you know, since I represent a university and not a funding organization, so I see myself more on the customer side, I thought I would close with a couple of points important from our side. What we would need is, of course, more sustainability-related funding schemes on a regional, national, and European-wide level, not only for research, but also for teaching and education. And as you may know, we're in the process of getting a new government in Germany. So, of course, the hope is that Germany's new government will prioritize R&D and achieve 3.5 GDP spending by 2025. And hopefully there won't be any cuts because of the COVID situation in R&D and higher education. And of course, this new government should also champion the prioritization of R&D within the EU. And secondly, we would also need an improved legal framework to really become more sustainable from an organizational point of view as a university. I think this is something which we can maybe discuss afterwards. Thirdly, we would also need to develop more sustainability-related seed funding so that startups developing out of the universities really have incentives to set up sustainability-related business models. And lastly, and this is me talking as someone working at an international office, we would also need to set up more international networks with a clear focus on sustainability, such as bilateral SDG partnerships. Thank you. And back to you, Melanie.
Great, thank you, Daniel, and thank you for working your way through that hiccup. Much appreciated. So next is our final panelist, and it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague Eddie Zuppel from the National Research Council of Canada's Clean and Efficient Transportation Program. Eddie oversees the research and development activities and assisting with industry and with policy development in the low carbon mobility sector. So over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Melanie, for the introduction, and to the CSPC for the opportunity to participate today. So I'd like to start with an introduction of the National Research Council for those who do not know the organization. Next slide, please. So the National Research Council is Canada's largest research institution with over 2,000 researchers, engineers, and technicians that are supporting R&D projects on a wide variety of subjects. The council also includes about 250 technical advisors from the Industrial Research Assistance Program that provides funding to small and medium enterprises. The organization manages about 180 buildings throughout the country, as you can see in the diagram below, and has an annual expenditure budget of over $1 billion, 300 million of which is funding that is allocated to small and medium enterprises program. During the course of the past years, NRC has been involved in over 1,500 collaborations with different partners and has supported over 8,000 small and medium enterprises throughout the country. If we go to the next slide. So the council is actually composed of 14 research centers, which focus on scientific themes and technologies. And these research centers are split into 4 main divisions: transportation, manufacturing, life sciences, engineering, and sorry, I can't. And emerging technologies. The last of the divisions is the Industrial Research Assistance Program that is split up into regional offices throughout the country. Next slide, please. So what does the NRC do? We have a mandate that is threefold. The first objective is to advance scientific and technical knowledge related to fundamental research and development. And this is achieved through collaborations with academia and external research centers. The second objective is to support government policy objectives. So we government departments by providing science-based data to inform the development of policies and regulations. And the last of the 3 objectives is to support business innovation. And this is supporting small and medium enterprises and larger multinational corporations in the acceleration of their technology development towards commercialization. These 3 objectives are achieved through different types of mechanisms, including technical services, research services, and collaborative research service agreements. Not mentioned here is also our grants and contributions possibilities that are used to fund academia and small and medium enterprises as well. Next slide, please. During the course of the past weeks and months, the NRC has gone through an inventory of ongoing and future activities related to Canada's climate action plan. The intent of the exercise was to identify activities that aligned well with Canada's priorities, and the result was the identification of 5 major pillars, which include clean energy production and storage, low carbon transportation, the decarbonization of the economy, adaptation and resiliency, and environmental protection. Each of these pillars is associated to several initiatives that are used to deploy and to host the projects and activities that will ensure alignment with the Canadian priorities. One of the major initiatives is the Clean and Energy Efficient Transportation Program that I'm currently leading, and that I will describe in some more detail in the next slide. Next slide. So the Clean and Energy and Efficient Transport, sorry, please go back to the previous one. So the Clean and Energy Efficient Transportation Program supports the development of clean and energy efficient transportation technologies while striving towards a zero emissions future. The program is composed of 6 major technological areas, including aerodynamics, alternative fuel applications, batteries, electrical machines, fleet energy efficiency, and hydrogen applications. And these 6 peripheral thrusts are supported by a common area, which is focused at the integration at the vehicle level, activities related to environmental scans, life cycle analysis, vehicle modeling, simulation, integration, testing, and demonstration. And all of this while leveraging new tools and technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics. And as mentioned before, the program works closely with industry to help accelerate technology development, in addition to supporting other government departments such as Transport Canada, Natural Resources Canada, and Environment Canada in policy and regulation development. Next slide, please. The SEED program also has several international activities and collaborations. At the NRC, we've identified 3 strategic countries with which we've built strategic collaborations with. They include Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom. The SEED program collaborates with each of those countries with respect to specific activities. For example, in Germany, we work with electric motor manufacturers and tier 1 suppliers to develop novel electric motor topologies. We're also collaborating with Fraunhofer, with whom we've organized several workshops on hydrogen fuel cell component diagnostics and quality controls. In Japan, we collaborate with vehicle manufacturers on trying to understand electric vehicle battery safety, and also development of magnetic material manufacturing for electric motors. We've also built a collaboration with Japan's largest research center, AIST, on the development of solid-state battery manufacturing. In the UK, the NRC recently held a summit with partners from the UK related to solid-state battery development, where researchers from both countries exchanged ideas, projects, and research directions in order to try and identify future collaborative projects in the next months and years. So that is a very short overview of the clean transportation activities at NRC. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Eddie. So just before we turn to Q&As, I did want to get a reminder out to the audience. There is a path to being able to enter questions. So it seems that the path is to push the green power button on your bottom right, and that should take you there to the live Q&A session if you've not seen it. So green power button, bottom right of the screen. So please take a look for that, and feel free to add any questions and comments. In the meantime, I'd like to pose a question to the panelists. I mean, throughout, one of the things that really struck me is well, probably leading off in part from Mike's comment about bringing in new actors through the mission and the challenge funding, and being able to attract those who hadn't traditionally worked with Innovate UK. So I'd be interested in hearing from the panel how you are attracting new players. We know that we can't solve this without societal acceptance, without engagement from many players. So how are you attracting in those new players to your living labs, to your various activities under the EU Green Deal, to your programs? And then how are you helping to ensure that these different players who aren't always working together in the past have been able to successfully engage? You know, if anyone has any particular tools or best practices to share on that. And maybe Mike, I'll turn to you first just to say, who are you attracting that is new, and why are they coming to the table, and how are you making sure they can engage effectively?
Thank you. Yes. So for us, we sort of boil innovation down to 3 words, which is inspire, involve, and invest. So what we've been trying to do is paint that picture of the future economy, show people where the opportunities are, and then involve them across the various supply chains. And sometimes it's people who haven't necessarily thought maybe that long term, or they haven't thought how they could connect in, or they hadn't realized that actually they've got part of a solution to a problem that other people had. So there's a lot of work that we do within all of our challenges, and particularly when we're running funding competitions, to sort of spread the word in terms of, you know, what are the sort of problems we're looking for people to come up against. You know, a lot of collaboration building. I know that goes on in many countries, and obviously internationally as well. And I think those are the hard yards. You have to put them in, and you have to reach out to those people. And then ultimately, you know, you have to make some selection choices. I mean, we've all got a certain amount of finance available. You can't fund all the great ideas, but then what you're trying to do then is invest in the very best. So it's very much about a sort of showing people what happens along the way, including them, and also showing them what comes out from these projects, because maybe they didn't get involved in the call this year, but maybe they could next year. So it's very much about building a community.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that? I'm not sure if I can see hands per se, but maybe just raise a hand and I will turn to you. Okay.
I can shortly share my thoughts on that, Melanie, if you wish. I mean, from an inter-university perspective, of course, like I said, it's very important that this path to sustainability is a very participatory process. So our president founded a working group, which is organized by the president's office. So we really have a very strong top-down support. And the president also participates in each of the meetings, you know, engaging with students, engaging with, you know, students that participate in Fridays for Future. So this is something which is really nice, and where, of course, the university as an organization is also getting challenged by the students. And then, you know, when you talk about the living labs, I think for us it's important that, you know, sustainability or the definition of sustainability does not only include, you know, an ecological component, but also a social and economic dimension. And, you know, Aachen is close to us are three of the largest open coal pits in Germany. I think the English term is lignite coal, lignite coal. And you know, coal will phase out in 2038. And so, you know, this is also an economic and social dimension, because, you know, we have 2,000-3,000 jobs there that are being, you know, lost until 2038. And what do you do with these people, and how do you create new jobs? So this for us is also very important to have that definition, which also includes, economic and a social dimension in regard to sustainability.
Great, thank you. All right. So I think the other thing, you know, that was also striking, Yuko, was with the moonshots and international collaboration on that. That's another very exciting agenda. Do you see international collaboration helping to speed up that process? And what are the successful tools for making that happen?
Yes, Melanie, definitely yes. Yes, so international partnership, international collaboration is a basic core to promote the scale of our research outcome to be more effective, more sustainable way. So JST now is under Hamaguchi plan. So we just highlight some key essence, core convergence and co-creation and innovation for sustainable resilient society, and all projects based on ongoing under this plan. So you know, but if you can say international collaboration is good, it's very easy to pronounce. But how we do achieve that, it's very, very difficult, especially for Japanese environment, because we are public funding agency, it's national. So how we can collaborate with other partners, so based on trust. So how we can build trust. So to promote international collaboration is our first challenge. So, but we do communicating with other partner counterparts, of course, in the United States or in Canada, Germany, and of course the UK and Norway. So we are always open to consider such a kind of collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we do have a question for Katrin as well. So Norway, of course, has a very large sovereign fund dedicated to climate change companies. So Katrin, would you be able to elaborate and tell us a bit about this?
Yes, I'll try to say something about that. We do have two funds. We have the Government Pension Fund Global, which is our savings for the future. The aim of this oil fund is to ensure responsible and long-term management of revenues from the Norwegian oil and gas resources, so that this wealth benefits both current and future generation. So this fund was set up a long time ago to shield the economy from ups and downs in oil revenue. And it also serves as a financial reserve and as a long-term savings plan, so that, as I just mentioned, this is not. There is. Let me rephrase that. Companies' activities have a great impact on surrounding communities and the environment, and society have ever greater expectations on how companies should behave. Over time, this may affect the profitability and the fund's return. As a long-term investor in around 9,000 companies in 74 countries, the Norwegian Oil Pension Fund have an interest in investors' demands for profitability being aligned with society's broader expectation of companies. So the fund consider environmental and social issues and publish clear expectations of the companies that the fund investment in. The Norwegian Parliament and the Ministry of Finance have laid down rules for the management of the fund and delegated responsibility for its management to the Norwegian Bank. And there is an independent council on ethics to perform ethical evaluations of the companies. So the fund itself may also decide to divest from companies that impose substantial costs on other companies or society as a whole, and so are not considered long-term sustainable. So this is not environmental fund, but it has the it is considering long-term effects. Our new Prime Minister said in Glasgow last week about the Norwegian Pension Fund that the financial sector must play its part, and the Norwegian Public Pension Fund Global is the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, and it invests worldwide. And it's important that to consider climate risk as a financial risk and needs to be managed as such. So although there's not like a political, it's not the main aim of this fund. It's what our Prime Minister, the message in Glasgow last week. And but we also have a state's climate investment company called Nysnø, which invests in profitable and smart solution to the challenges of climate change. Nysnø's aim is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provide positive social effects. And based on the current knowledge on greenhouse gas emissions, certain sectors stands out: energy, transport, infrastructure, buildings, industrial processes, and food productions. And it's important that it's a profitable solutions, which means that Nysnø invests alongside the private partners, participants looking for climate-friendly investments. Was that answering your question?
Yes, thank you for that, Katrin. So we do have a question from the audience for Daniel. You had mentioned your aspirations for where the investment level in R&D should be for Germany, Daniel. And somebody was asking if you could elaborate on the rate of business expenditures on R&D and government expenditures on R&D in Germany. We're putting you on the spot with this one.
I was going to say, yeah, obviously I don't represent the government, but I know the numbers. So I think at the moment, Germany invests 3.2% of the GDP on research and development. And the goal is to get that number to 3.5 in 2025. And that's also part of our high-tech strategy 2025. By the old government, and hopefully also by the new government soon. And if you look at the money being invested, 70% is really R&D investment by industry, and mostly by the automotive industry and the machine manufacturing industry. So it's really the large German automotive companies such as VW, Daimler, etc., that invest a lot in R&D, that file most of the patents in Germany. But still 30% of that share comes from the government, and I think is more or less equally divided between university research and non-university research. But it's really driven by industry, you have to say, yeah.
Great, thank you for that. So Eddie, I may turn to you. Of course, you are not a funder of research, although there is some funding from NRC, but primarily a performer. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little on how you work with industry partners and international partners on sustainability.
Sure. So at the NRC, the main mechanism for collaboration are the research and development programs. The programs, energy efficient transportation program, are focused on different applications, different end uses, or different parts of the supply chain. And really, we create the link between the research capabilities, expertise within the council and various industrial players and external collaborators, whether they be academia or other sectors as well. And so, a lot of our focus is on supporting Canadian industry and Canadian partners. However, we realize that Canada, despite it is a small nation, and we need to collaborate internationally in order to remain competitive and to integrate ourselves into the supply chains, which are becoming more and more global. So in terms of international collaborations, we have, as I alluded to in my presentation, identified 3 strategic countries, Japan and the UK. And the international office at the NRC has liaisons with each of these countries that promote exchanges with the programs and the various researchers in order to identify areas of complementary collaboration, which is important because, again, in the clean transportation space, the technologies are moving extremely quickly. And not only in Canada, but globally, we can't afford to be redundant and have overlap in terms of development. So, we participate in missions, conferences, and exchanges in order to identify these critical areas. And then there are many mechanisms in place, different types of funding opportunities that we leverage when we've identified specific project ideas and collaborations that are mutually beneficial between the parties of the different countries.
Great, thank you. So I'm just checking if there are any further questions from the audience. And we do have one for you, Yuko. Just highlighting that Japan, of course, is well known for its research, very highly rated. It has been very, very successful in many areas. Now, we're wondering here, how do you decide the research themes and then to select the programs going forward?
So thank you, it's a good question. So we have a different mechanism to decide the research theme. So it depends on the programs. For example, I show you some example. For example, I described Moonshot Research and Development Program. This is, first of all, this is launched by our cabinet office, not JST. So cabinet office person set up such kind of risk challenging programs, but they have no knowledge in terms of scientific excellence. So they created some advisory board. It's called visionary board. It's involving industry person and academic person and different stakeholders. They are discussing maybe for 1 year and several months. It's long-term communication. So, and in the process of setting up some research area, research team, so we have also international symposium to involving international perspectives from the UK and from the US, where different countries contribute some to create our moonshot. So that's why it's based on long-term discussion and long-term scientific communication. So finally, so cabinet office decided a scientific theme. And now this is managed by JST. Of course, in the process of research theme setting, JST involved as an advisor, as an observer. Of course, so we also some contributed to make it up. So it's not like a smart, elegant communication process, but it's a range of communication. So based on such a kind of good discussion, we finally set up several goals for Moonshot. This is one example. So it's another version also I want to talk to, but some due to time limitation, I just show the one example. And also we have also inside the think tank, it's called the Center for Research and Development Strategy. It's a kind of in-house JST think tank. So they are also every year, every 2 years, making a strategic proposal to our cabinet office. So, and after with those proposals, our cabinet office looking at what kind of area should be invested in Japan in the future. So that's why it's another mechanism to we can decide research theme. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
So it's a process is complicated anyway.
But it sounds like you are bringing together again, I think, on that theme, many different actors, right?
Yeah, it is. So yeah, it is a very important aspect for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So I think that has been common throughout and is one of the interesting discussions. And Daniel, you alluded to that as well in terms of bringing in the South in different cases. Mike, I may turn back to you. And of course, you know, there was the shifts in terms of policy direction, the 10-point plan, the net zero strategy. What are all of the impacts of these various investments and strategies in the UK with respect to the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund? And do you foresee any changes based on recent movement for the mechanisms to support industry or international engagements?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's one of the things we're always very passionate about in our discussions with government. So we are a public body, but we're not part of the department. But we always make the point that government's got priorities that the country needs to address, and from those priorities comes opportunity. So what we try and do is work with them on that. So whether it's the 10-point plan, or whether it's some of the things we're trying to do in health and care, or more broadly in terms of technology or sustainability. And I also agree with the point that was made earlier as well about sustainability in terms of not just natural capital, but also human capital, and as well as fiscal capital as well. So I think what we're always trying to do is make that case, which is from those challenges comes the opportunity, and those are solutions we've got to find anyway, because we can't. The one thing I think we could probably all agree on, and get our politicians to all agree on, is that more of the same is not going to work. It's not going to cut it. So we need to do things differently. And if you need to do things differently, then you need to innovate. And I think that's then not just about how do you do that in any one country or any one region, but also I think internationally. And I would completely agree with that the points that have been made about how do you bring together those international collaborations, because they are important. We often say in the UK, we know that 15% of the most highly cited research originates from the UK. That does, however, mean that 85% of it does not. So how do you access some of those great ideas wherever they are across the world? And also, this is a global supply chain now. So you need to be thinking about how it all connects, and how do we share value, and how do we share understanding. So I think from the opportunities that flow from the challenges that we face, it's about phrasing them in the right way. So sort of, you're not just doing it for the sake of it. You're doing it with an end in mind. So for every single challenge that we have, we've got a particular target of where we're going to get to within 5 years. With regards to then, how does it actually open up the opportunities in 10 to 15 years? So a lot of those are, about half of our portfolio is in the net zero space. We didn't set out to achieve it that way. That is what came from the selection process that we ran. And we've heard, obviously, in terms of how our colleagues in Japan have done some of their selections of their programs. But as we were looking at where the opportunities were, they just naturally came out in that space. And some of it's, we've all got many things in common, because we are all facing similar challenges. And I think one of the other things, just to finish before I hand back, I think one of the other bits is we're also very conscious of how do you come up with a solution that doesn't create another problem. So, for example, one of our challenges is in smart, sustainable plastic packaging, and picking up on the point about the importance of the oceans. A lot of that, there was a big impact in this country of people seeing the impact of plastics on the oceans through a program called Blue Planet 2. And on the back of that, the whole country is saying, well, something must be done. But of course, what you need to do is do the right thing, because we don't just want to turn that plastic then into a carbon problem, which then creates other issues. So you need to think about how the whole life cycle can fit together. And it's that sort of approach that we've been trying to foster. And again, that's why bringing in new people's very important.
Thank you. Yes, I think adding that diversity and the new thinking to this is critical and comes through across, and because these are, again, issues to be addressed by society, it's important to do that. So maybe a question I would throw out for all of you who would like to would be perhaps some tips on how you can help to incentivize collaboration across different players. I'll look for a hand or a smile or someone trying to hide from the camera. Would someone like to take this? Any tips to share on how to do effective collaboration?
I think the first thing to do is to get people talking. I did a lot of work with across Europe on multiple transnational programs, and it's about getting people talking, and sometimes to share common understanding, because people don't, and you need an element, sometimes the fact that we end up with language differences actually creates a possibility, because some people interpret things in different ways, which actually does spark interesting debates. So I think for me, it's about getting people interacting, because if you do that, we're a social being, we're human beings, we're a social being, and I think that first and foremost is the most important thing.
Well, Melanie, if I can add, I completely agree with Mike that exchange is an important initial step. And in my experience, there is no shortage of project ideas, of collaboration ideas. There are barriers, however, in many cases related to funding, and how do we actually deliver on those ideas? How do we actually put those ideas in action? And on that side, I would say that there has to be comprehensive funding calls that are inclusive and that are actually harmonized between the various countries that are taking part. So in some cases, the funding calls have different stakeholders in the different countries, and they may not be aligned. So I think there has to be communication on the research and development side, but also in terms of the various funding organizations that are collaborating to support the various research activities.
Thanks. Very important. Yuko, your plan B alluded to some of that. I think what do we do? How do we collaborate in a virtual world?
Yeah.
Please, any thoughts on how to do that effectively while we aim for Plan A?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a public funder, so I think most importantly to create a collaboration platform, so and where the multi-stakeholders know each other. So this is, I think, the public funder's mission to incentivize collaboration domestically and internationally. because researchers knows what's the most excellent outcome will be. So they know already, but so in Japanese context, researcher working in university doesn't know well about industry researcher, industry person. So how they can collaborate, how they know each other, that's a problem. So in this context, so public founders like JST, we try to create the meeting point or virtual platform, not in-person platform, where the industry person, university person, and multi-stakeholders so discuss together and see some exchange opinions, opportunities. That is a very important thing, I think, for public founders.
Great. So playing a strong role in convening the dialogue as well. Daniel, as from the university perspective, what are your thoughts on that? You've spoken to the need to have a supranational structure like the EU Green Deal to bring people together. Are there other things you see in terms of convening to enable collaboration, incentivize collaboration beyond the funding?
Essentially, I mean, I can only second what my colleagues just said. You know, for me, like Mike said, I think it's just important to start talking, to start bringing people together. But, you know, as specifically for me, as someone working in administration, I think it's also important, you know, to align that level with our international partners, just as Eddie also mentioned, so that the researchers can, I don't know, start talking more effectively. So we really have to, talk as much as possible on different layers, different levels. And then I think, you know, this will be more efficient and effective.
Great, thank you. And Katrin, on your side in Norway, I mean, how have you dealt with enabling collaboration that you are doing on oceans and elsewhere throughout the pandemic?
I think we have, as I was talking about, the ocean panel is very important to us as a tool for international collaboration, and I think it's a very effective organization because there's the countries involved in that work has a big interest in this area. So this has been very effective, and I think the pandemic has, of course, resulted in it's not been possible for the leaders to meet physically, but there's been a lot of collaborations, you know, via Teams and other ways. So I think this is a very important project to us. And I was also, I'm just thinking that we have a lot of collaborations, both bilateral and multilateral cooperations as our strategy. But we also must focus on the poor countries, and I think from the Glasgow meeting we have big initiatives on how to support poor countries in aiming for the climate goals. There's a big priority in Norway to renew a climate investment initiative to fund renewable energy in developing countries.
Yeah. I did, sorry, I'm just checking here on my questions, but there is another question, and that one is coming back to what does success look like for you? Many of the programs are built on others. How do you decide what worked? And I would say with that, maybe I'll just open that if there's somebody who does want to talk about what success looks like. In a collaboration. I think we know we're hoping to achieve the outcomes that we have aimed at. But would anyone like to talk a bit about perhaps a successful example of a collaboration that was able to mobilize the community for sustainability?
So I'll have a start, I think. So for all of us, for all the challenges we have quite a specific framing of the challenge. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into the challenge statement for the 20 or so challenges that we have. And I think what we're then looking is we were also trying to set that event horizon, right? So it's in sort of, broadly speaking, sort of 5 years time, and what might we get to in the future. One of the ones we haven't sorted yet, but for example, we've had an announcement in this country today around a small modular reactor, what we call our low-cost nuclear program. And one of the things that was coming from that was about a very specific goal of having a design that would be compliant with the regulatory requirements for small modular reactors within, broadly speaking, 5-year time frame. So there's a very specific outcome that is required, and a very specific program that fits behind that, for example. And then, as I say, for other things, we've then trying to been looking at the broader aspects of some of these things. So there was mention earlier of solid state batteries and other activities. The work that we're doing under a lot of that banner in the UK is under our Faraday Battery Challenge. And what we've been trying to do there is think about that in terms of the solutions that we need now, because obviously there is a demand for how do we manufacture the batteries that we want using the technologies that we currently have. Trying to think about the technologies that we will need on vehicle within, say, 3, 5, 7 years time, but also to make sure that we foster the research that we will need for 10 years time. So that's where some of the solid state battery work comes in here. It's difficult to imagine right now that one will be putting them in volume on a vehicle, but you need to do the research so you can understand what the solutions are. So I think what we've been trying to do in the UK is have specific sets of targets that one could have, both in terms of immediate deliverables as well as the sort of what you need to follow on with. And every single thing we fund would be following that sort of pattern.
Right. So looking really at the long term as well as immediate needs and collaboration. Yeah. Great. I also have a question related to impact. And the question was really around whether any of you have done any kind of impact studies to look at whether the results with respect to, for example, patenting, IP disclosures, publications were already referenced as stronger when, well, they weren't, but I will say quite often they are stronger with international collaborations in terms of field-weighted citation indices. But does anyone have any work on impact studies to show what kind of collaboration can be the most effective in choosing and getting the results you are looking for, whether it be for co-innovation for SMEs, for patenting, or other purposes? So best return on investment for a type of collaboration. And maybe we could say, we would have domestic collaborations, international collaborations primarily between scientists, those that are mixed. The answer can be no.
I can perhaps give the NRC perspective, I guess, specific to the program that I'm leading. I would say that the success is very much dependent on the having a strong receptor, a technological receptor in the project, and in particular an industrial partner where the outcomes of the project can result in a certain growth for the company, an increased market share. From our perspective, this is the best way of quantifying the impact of the collaboration, whether it be domestic or international. I think the absence of a strong receptor, generally speaking, weakens the collaboration and makes it more fundamental in nature. So we try and prioritize and emphasize collaborations where we know the technology development will actually benefit in the short and medium term.
If I could add to that as well, so every single challenge that we have in the UK has a benefits realization plan, but it also has an independent evaluation plan as well. So one of the conditions of approval when we got the Treasury to release the money was that we would have a clear evaluation plan in place. So all of that is, and we have interim reports along the way as well. So there's a sort of understanding the market at the start. There's then the piece in the middle in terms of the progress to date, and then there's a sort of retrospective piece several years after the funded projects have completed. And so what we've been trying to do is how do you actually get the early signals along the way? So when we're choosing the challenges, you're kind of informed by market trends and where things. You can do the analysis afterwards, which will actually show you that you've had the right sort of impact. Is what's the equivalent of being in the car, and rather than looking at the front windscreen or the rear view mirror, what's the equivalent of the kids in the back of the car shouting, "Are we there yet?" So we've been trying to build in a lot of sort of project completion activity to understand whether we are actually seeing the early signs, which was, and we are getting that in the UK. We're seeing that we're getting increased turnover, increased patenting, increased collaborations. It's promising so far.
Great, thank you for that. And I would mention maybe just on the impact side of things as well, that the National Research Council has taken a similar approach, and we do share on our website many of those metrics and the evaluations and assessments. So there is another resource to look at for the person who was posing the question. And I think we've got time perhaps for just one last question. And I'll open this one up to all of you. And essentially, it's a question really around geopolitical shifts, right, and supply chain shifts, and to ask if any of you have seen through the recent shifts in the world a change in terms of your work and in terms of how you approach your work. And would you like to provide a few thoughts and comments on that? Katrin, were you?
Yes, I can start. Yeah, thank you. I would say definitely yes, and definitely the last big change for the last 3 or 4 years, and now with the election this fall and the debates the debates we had with regards to the election, it was a highly it was a very important topic, much more important on the agenda than just a few years ago. And we also see that the government has more a more strategic approach to the climate change policy. So I'm quite optimistic about the direction and the interest, and also the need to address this in a powerful way.
Thank you. Great. I'm just pausing in case anybody else would like to weigh in on that question.
Oh, yes. So the answer is definitely yes. So recently, last 2 or 3 years, of course, we have changing geographically research collaboration. Of course, so most importantly, JST is valued common value. So for research, for example, transparency and freedom, mutual benefit. But some countries, it doesn't match such a kind of value. So we should be more carefully to be address such issues. So research collaboration is, of course, based on freedom, but we are very focused on research integrity and research security to collaborate with other international counterparts. It's a very difficult point to discuss, but we just now is ongoing discussion with inside JST and with our government level. So now is I don't conclude what Japan is heading for, but anyway, we are very interested to discussing such a point of view. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any last words on that?
I mean, I can only just second what the others said. Of course, the field of science diplomacy, as I guess you would call it, is becoming more and more important for my field too. You know, how do you cooperate with partners in a very fast changing world, and where, you know, sometimes partners are changing faster than you, and how do you deal with difficult political settings in you know, some countries? How do you deal with the global South? How do you deal with the responsibility that you have as a university to tackle global challenges? Yeah, of course, that's huge questions that we are trying to find an answer to. But I think I'll leave it with that.
Great, thank you. I think that's a topic for another panel in the future. It is a challenging one for us right now. So I think we're reaching the end of our time, in fact. So I do want to take a moment to thank the audience for being here with us today, to thank the CSPC for allowing this panel and engaging us. And of course, to thank the panelists for joining, as well as the team that has helped to pull all of this together. Great session. Much to think about coming away from this. Certainly it comes through very clearly that addressing any of these challenges is going to require not all of our countries, but also all of the different stakeholders from many countries around the world, and many stakeholders who haven't traditionally participated in innovation. So a lot of interesting ways to bring them to the table, get them engaged, and I look forward to seeing more about what comes from many of these initiatives. So thanks again to all of you, and thanks. And I think with that, we will close.